release and presentation of a really, really interesting book that one of our members have delivered in in alliance with Roachley, the publisher here in the one of the publishers here in the UK. But as you know, the book that we're going to present and comment today is called A People's History of the Farmers Movement 2020-2021. That, as you know, was a huge movement that happened in India. And I'm really, really excited that having all these like a really, really interesting people to comment and to present the book. So as you know, we have three commentators for the book today, and we have the honor to have the book editors as well. And we're going to hopefully deliver a really interesting an hour-ish, an hour and a half conversation. We're going to happen this morning, afternoon, night for all of you. It's going to be like in 3 moments. I'm going to introduce in the first moment to our commentators, to the book editors of the book. I'm going to provide some key information about them. And after that, we're going to have a section when the book editors, Saba Siddiqui and Shamsher Singh, are going to present the book. They're going to hopefully highlight some of the main elements of the book and give us like the context and set the place, if you want, just to have a discussion of the book. And the next part of our session will be the presentation of the comments of our three commentators, and after that we're going to open the floor for all of you. So we have three commentators for today. We have Simin Fadeh, Professor Venkatesh Atreya, and Dr. Prithvi Datta Chandra, and I'm going to introduce all of the people who are going to help to deliver this amazing session of RC48 in alliance with RC47. So, as you know, the editors of our book are our esteemed colleagues, Dr. Shamsher Singh and Dr. Saba Siddiqui. So, Dr. Shamsher Singh, he teaches sociology at Flame University in Pune, India, and he had been, of course, researching in different kind of elements regarding socioeconomic villages studies across different states in India, and his work focuses on issues regarding rural housing, living conditions, unfriendly labor, and residential segregation, and agrarian relations in India. And he curates the book that we're going to talk today, the People's, and sorry, he curates the archive that is called the People's Archive of Farmers Protest. That is a website that you can find on the internet to find, of course, all the information regarding these mobilizations, and it's a kind of a repository of all the protest actions of the farmers' movements for 2020 to 2021. The second editor of the book is Dr. Saba Siddiqui. She is an assistant professor of psychology at Korea University, and she's interested in human experiences, collective mobilizations, and social movements beyond the confines of the individual psyche. And she's the author of Religion and Psychoanalysis in India, another book that Roachley published in 2016, and she has a plethora of publications regarding this topic. So in this first moment of the second moment of our conversation, I'm going to give the floor to both of them, who are going to present the book, hopefully in 15-20 minutes. So the floor is yours, and thank you all of you once again for being here in this session.
Thank you, Professor Camilo. So between two of the editors, we decided that I'll go first, and then Sabah will take on. Okay, before I begin my presentation about the book, I would like to thank the RC48 and the RC47 of the Indian International Sociological Association, and in particular RC48 President Professor Camilo, for all the efforts that he has put in, and he has really made it sound like effortless and really smooth, but I know how much work has gone in organizing and coordinating this entire event with different people, with different dates, etc. So thank you very much, Professor Camilo and Professor Simin, who has very kindly agreed to join the discussions. I would also like to thank the discussants and the commentators, Professor Prithvi Datta Chandra Shobhi, Professor Venkatesh Atriya, and Professor Simin, who took time out to engage with this work and who kindly agreed, to give their comments on the work. I also welcome my co-editor, Dr. Sabha Siddiqui, our contributors, those who I can see here, Professor Rajeshwari, Professor Mahavir Jaglan, uh, who else? That's it, I think. Please forgive me if I've missed out on spotting you somewhere uh, in the box here. And my colleagues from my institutes and friends. So before I begin giving the main topics that we cover in this book, a brief exposition about the idea that started this book. It basically stemmed from the process of documenting and archiving the events, protest actions, and mobilizations of the anti-farm law movement in 2020 and 2021. So as the movement prolonged from its initial starting point in the end of 2020, it basically invoked a lot of interest among the people, those who have interest in agrarian relations and rural issues. So as a natural interest for me was to and also like my close proximity to the Delhi borders is where I come from in Haryana. It was not very far from where one of the main prominent protest site was shaping up. So the idea started with the archiving of this multi-dimensionally growing, ever-expanding movement, not only in terms of its longevity or duration, but also in terms of how it was inviting different a range of actors, varied interests, and strategies in the due course. So the process which initially began with real-time documentation of the farmers' movement, protest actions, events, and mobilizations. It went on for almost a year, and at the end of when the farmers, achieved their demands, that was the demand for withdrawal of the three farm law movement. In consultation with a couple of my friends, and Sabha was one of them, we thought that there has to be this documentation has to come out in the form of a public repository. So the movement, the archive, which Professor Camilo also mentioned in my introduction, named as People's Archive of Farmers Protest, which is now available as a public repository on the internet. It can be looked up by typing pafp.in, and this gives the major events over the period of 16-month long farmers movement. So that is where the idea of bringing out this volume came to start. Now, those who follow the rural and the agrarian issues in India, they would know that since the last few decades, basically, starting of the 1990s, India liberalized its economy and also kind of participated in the globalization process of producing food and commodity trading. Now, more particularly at the beginning of this century, there have been sustained struggles by the peasantry, tenants, farmers of different classes, Adivasis, Dalits, against land encroachment, depletion of natural resources, displacement, and widespread exclusion from welfare mechanisms under the neoliberal policy regime. Formation of the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, AIKSCC, in the aftermath of the police firing on farmers in Mandsaur in Madhya Pradesh in June 2017, and the Bhumi Adhikar Andolan, BAA, against the Land Acquisition Amendment Ordinance in 2015 were important developments in intensifying grassroots struggles and campaigns in the form of Kisan Jathas, Mahapadaos, Gheraos, which are the sit-ins in front of government offices, putting up deputation to the government officials, calling rural strikes and padiyatras, that is marching on foot across different states in India on the issues of land, water, minimum support price, debt waiver, housing, MGNREGA, and forest rights. Now, what happens in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, when all of us are going through a huge crisis of survival for our livelihoods, work-related issues, and a large amount of migration is taking place across India, there comes three agri laws which were brought in by the government in the first place as agri as ordinances, which is an extraordinary parliamentary step and can only usually exercised in the times of emergency. So these contentious agri laws were brought in June 2020 with the limited opportunities for farmers to mobilize in against or in opposition to these farmers laws, these agri laws, due to the imposed restrictions because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The first few months of protest were quite limited and very localized. Now what happens in the end of 2020, in November to be specific, end of November 26-27, farmers organization under a collective banner give a call to march to Delhi, and farmers from different parts of the country, primarily those who are close to Delhi, start marching towards Delhi. And if you look at the highways which were leading to the national capital city, they were dug up. There were physical obstacles and barriers which were put in place to stop the farmers from marching to Delhi. Now, this triggered a huge response of support and solidarity among different sections of the rural masses who joined the farmers who were marching towards Delhi in enabling them to overcome these physical obstacles. So once you have this kind of scene playing out on the highways where farmers are facing serious repression and oppression by the law enforcement agencies, it also takes the national media's attention, which so far was ignoring these protests. Now the anti-farm law movement, as it grew so the farmers, once they tried to reach after a day's delay, they were stopped at the entry points into the capital city Delhi, and they decided as a strategic move to sit where they were stopped by the law enforcement agencies. And this has resulted in farmers surrounding the Delhi, across different entry points, which were called the Delhi borders. So you had a number of border points where farmers encamped, for the next year or so. Now, once this movement grew, it impacted different aspects of agrarian society, and at the same time, different sections of society played a role in sustaining these protests. It was not easy, as you see in some of our contributors have highlighted in their chapters and in their descriptions, that how difficult it was for them to stay while changing climatic conditions and other kinds of hardships that they had to go through. Now, while the agitation began with the demand to withdraw the three contentious farm laws, there was both spatial and thematic growth during the course of the protests, turning it into a broader mass movement. The movement did not restrict itself in narrow identities of religion, region, caste, ethnicity, or language, or caste for that matter. Now, in this volume, what we try and do is to bring together accounts of the micro processes witnessed in the progression of this multifaceted struggle, with the ending of the protest and the dismantling of the protest camps around Delhi at dozens of toll plazas in Delhi and Punjab and other protest sites in different states in December 2021. The volume collates and tries to comprehend and what happened on the ground across different regional contexts with an interdisciplinary approach. Now, we knew that a range of commentaries, op-eds, response pieces, and even some of the scholarly, written articles were coming in public domain as the farmers were continuing their agitation in 2021. We seriously felt the need to put across an all-rounded understanding of this movement, because it was not just about what was going on day-to-day basis, where the most of the analyses were restricting themselves. We decided that there has to be an all-rounded and a more multidimensional attempt to understand not only the causes of distress, etc., but how this particular movement is going to impact the rural mobilizations, the rural and the agrarian politics. This is where an understanding developed to approach different people, to bring in their own expertise. So if you look at the range of papers that we have, they broadly engage with prominent cultural resources, socio-political processes, activism, and religious practices that sustained the protest. The volume speaks to and speaks of the wide-ranging actors, varied interest, and creative energies that went in the making of this movement. It also explores the symbiotic relationship among theoretical positions, mobilization strategies, and cultural processes in the making of a mass movement, and the dialectical relationship of change and continuity at the grassroots. In this method, we particularly thought of the approach which is known as the people's history approach, where we give priority to the people's voices, we give their priority to their experiences and their narratives. This is something that most of our chapters deal with, and they are there emerge two significant facets of the analysis in the book across the chapters. The first one being that the chapters do not only document the kind of successes that the agitation had, and the victories not only just in the form of the final and the major victory of their demands of withdrawal of the farm laws movement, but also a more smaller mobilizations that were taking shape, taking place across the country on a range of issues. So they don't only restrict themselves to kind of glorify these victories, and they definitely look into and elucidate the dimensions of the struggle between the large sections of peasantry on one hand and the government on the other. Secondly, they do not let the conflicts between different classes and social divisions in the countryside disappear while underlining the emerging solidarities during the movement. The intersecting themes addressed in the volume comprise the theoretical and empirically informed perspectives from during and post-movement phases. The book locates the project between theory and activism to put forward a rounded analysis of a significant phase in the agrarian history of the country. And with some of our contributors having the expertise in political geography, in cultural studies, in psychology, in economics, in architecture and habitation studies, sociology, and law and history, they bring together this interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity in their analysis, basing very enriched discussions on field data collected and observations collected through the interactions with different participants across India. And we try and make the volume as an inclusive project, which not only speaks from the borders, which were the prominent protest sites across Delhi, but we also, had this thought, and we were very clear from the beginning that we need to bring in the narratives from the major protest locations geographically spread across the country and even beyond. So Professor Pritam's work on diaspora in the United Kingdom. We have chapters from different states in India, such as Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab. Yeah, I think this is some of the states that our contributors cover, and one of the things that our contributors made it very easy for us, that as soon as we wrote to them and tried to we shared the book proposal with them, there wasn't a question asked from their side, and they all came on board with so much of enthusiasm and energy to make this happen. So this wouldn't have been, of course, possible without their rigor and their scholarly insights into their individual chapters, which enrich the book project as a whole. Now I would stop here and let Sabha say a few things. I'm sorry if I have like ruined your structure of the thoughts that you wanted to say, and some of the things we can also respond in the later in the later section after the commentators have given their comments. So thank you. I will stop here.
Okay. So thank you, Shamshi. That was a great introduction. I feel like you did say a lot of things, and so perhaps I can concentrate on a fewer points, which will also then allow me to stay with them. First of all, good day to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Shamshed has given, he has expressed gratitude towards many people, both those who are attending, but also those who are not able to make it. Of course, our contributors, those who finally appeared in the book, but also we had to have conversations with many more people, some of whom could not come, come into the book, timeline reasons and several other kinds of conditions. But so this work actually involved talking to many different groups. The multidisciplinarity of the project, of course, is one thing that so Shamshed and I had to keep talking to people from different spaces and different locations, like disciplinary locations. I think what perhaps I can then focus on is the idea of that is there in the title, the people's history. So I'm not a historian, neither is Shamshed. And so like our decision to call it a people's history definitely is, first of all, we step out of our own we step out of the comfort of our own disciplinary locations. But it is also to say that because the moment in which the farmers movement actually was occurring, this was in 2020, was on the back of several other social movements that had also captured the imagination of the country. One of them was the anti-CAA NRC protests, in very similar, like within Delhi, while the farmers' protests were around Delhi. And so this was on the back of those social movements. And what happened very quickly was that the narrative about what happens in these social movements was very quickly rewritten. I saw that with the CA-NRC protests. And so one of the tasks that we took it upon ourselves is to write the history of this movement, of this event ourselves, right? Before it can be usurped, before somebody else can re-narrativize it, especially given the way it was made into a controversial movement. And I'm sure you'll be able to read that in more official accounts of this, what happened here. We chose to talk about it as a people's movement because, first of all, we wanted to prioritize the people who were involved in the protests, and so they should be able to tell their own story and to say what happened. So it in very much, while this is a theoretical work, this is also an activist work, this book. And it therefore, one of the things that we had all asked ourselves and our contributors to do was to focus on the microprocesses, on the details, the granularity of what happened on the field. In fact, one of the first papers we received was by Professor Rajeshwari and Professor Mahabir, who are here today. And we were, in fact, very, it was the idea of granularity was something already there in their paper. And so we could now, ask other contributors to also follow up on that, to focus on a facet of the protest, and so to bring in as much detail, right? So in a way, this is a continuation of the archive project, which Shamshed also has in the website. It is to start creating the archive of what happened here, especially because in the history of independent India, this moment, the farmers' movement in 21 was an example of what people coming together could achieve. It was a long duration protest, which also was it involved many different groups coming together, and it ended successfully with the withdrawal, at least on paper, of the farm laws, right? Like after that, there have been other movements where farmers have gone back to the ground to say that, the promises need to be now met. But this was a significant victory, the withdrawal of the 3 farm laws. And I think this is why this book matters today. First of all, because it tells the story of the event in detail and with the voices of people who did engage in it. But it also becomes a blueprint for what can be done for social movements in India, given that it brought so many people together to work together. And how does that happen in a country as diverse as India? So we hope that this book can therefore be can provide a blueprint for how social movements in the future in India can be thought about and can be planned. But of course, the work is not done. The book is, of course, published, but the work continues, right? We hope that this book will therefore provide us with will help us think of new questions to ask, both about peasant movements and other kinds of social movements. We'll think about agrarian relations in India, for which we require archives to be put into place. And I hope that this book is therefore an invitation for new kinds of work and new kinds of questions. I think perhaps I can see that we are running out of time. So I will just perhaps end by saying that I think that one thing that this book does, which I think is something that I have really carried with me since then, it has now been 4 years, is that it allowed us to think about how history should be written by the people, and how we can also, like each of us can therefore write history. It's also why I invited Professor Prithvi today, who is part of the history department, to comment on the fact that non-historians will also write history. Thank you.
Thank you, Samshar, and thank you, Saba, for presenting your book and for presenting this really interesting overview of your work and the book. I really like this word of microprocess that you both have highlight during your presentation, how this movement can be seen as a good example of how to develop microprocesses in different places of the world. Of course, we're going to talk more about that. Thank you once again for presenting. I want to say hello to the 143 people who are watching us now live on YouTube. And thank you once again for all of you who are here in the call. We have 3 commentators for the book, and I'm going to give the floor to our first commentator, who is Dr. Simin Fadeh. She is a senior lecturer in sociology at the University of Manchester, and as so many of you know, she's the president of the research committee number 47, that is the research committee on social classes and social movements of the International Sociological Association, that, as you know, is a kind of like a sister research committee for RC48. So thank you, Simin, for me here. Her work is mostly focused on social movements, revolutions, and social justice. She has conducted research in numerous places, but mostly in Iran, India, and Germany. And I guess you know that her recent book has been published by Manchester University Press, and it's called Global Marxism and Decolonization and Revolutionary Politics. I really, really encourage you to buy this book. And Simin, thank you once again for this invitation, for being here. And you will have 15 minutes, 20 minutes to provide comments to the book. And I will move, of course, to the other commentators. But once again, thank you, Simin, for being here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. And many congratulations to the editors of this very timely and powerful book for putting together such an engaging and insightful collection, really. Most edited volumes become boring at some point, but when I read this book, I felt like so excited about it. I think all chapters were so interesting and so inspiring. These diverse contributions present an outstanding balance of history, I would say, structure, and agency. And in doing so, the book captures not only the events, but the spirit, strategies, and significance of the farmers' movement in India. I would say the collection is praiseworthy also for offering a blend of macro and micro perspectives. Some chapters provide a broader overview of the movement, while others zoom into particular protest sites or regional variations. There is also a thoughtful mix of analytical depth and rich empirical detail, which gives attention to sociopolitical, cultural, and economic dynamics. And not to be forgotten, actually, the illustrations and drawings throughout the book are both evocative and informative. They really add visual meaning to the textual narrative. I really love them. The farmers' movement marked, obviously, a major rupture in the new liberal development trajectory and delivered a serious blow to corporate-backed policy and governance. And to me, it must be understood as a historic moment in the lineage of people's movements, not only in India, but globally. The book rightly positions this movement as not just a protest movement, but a mass assertion of democratic rights, demonstrating how ordinary citizens, when unified, can reverse even the most powerful legislative decisions. The challenge of recording such a moment involves both celebrating the victory and analyzing its roots and strategies that made it actually possible. So in the first part of my talk, I'm going to focus on the strategies because I believe we can learn so much from them in terms of movement organizing. So the movement was organized under a model of collective leadership, which operated based on consensus. This collaborative structure ensured that decisions ranging from protest strategies to public statements reflected the diverse voices and interests of the participants. This balance really matters. It underlines the importance of effective leadership and at the same time, democratic leadership as a strategic necessity in sustaining and ultimately securing the movement's goals. It also reveals a crucial lesson for social movements more broadly. Leadership matters a lot, but it must not only guide, it should also remain accountable, transparent, and representative of its constituents. Alliance and coalition building played a significant role in this movement. The backbone of the movement was comprised of small, marginal, and middle farmers, along with landless workers and trade unions. Hundreds of organizations came together for a common cause, and that was the repeal of the 3 controversial farm laws. It was this unity in diversity that challenged the new liberal corporate-driven agenda and forced the government to repeal the laws. Also, these forced solidarities across class, caste, and religion. Religion and region, pointing to the potential for future alliances in broader political struggles. I've also written an article on this topic in the journal International Sociology in case there is interest. It's also important to note that the unity that was formed was not linear, but dynamic, constantly negotiated and renegotiated between all these groups who were participating. So this element of strategic negotiation within the movement elevated the protests and placed the political question of agrarian crisis and rural justice in the national spotlight. By occupying highways, toll plazas, and city borders, protesters reclaimed public spaces and redefined their relationship to the nation. They demonstrated that democracy isn't just about voting, but also about participation, it's about dissent, and it's about dialogue. The movement proved that the will of the people, when expressed en masse, can actually triumph over authoritarian tendencies. The discussion on langars, or the Sikh tradition of serving free community meals, captures the heart of mutual aid, resilience, and solidarity. Sustained for over a year, langars were organized with roles distributed for sourcing, cooking, cleaning, and logistics. Even as the movement endured harsh weather and political pressure, the langar symbolized a collective promise, and that was, no one goes hungry. This wasn't just a religious act, it was a political one and a strategy for keeping the movement going. Despite being rooted in Sikh tradition, the langar became a universal tool for protest infrastructure, in fact. Also, the effective use of platforms like YouTube and social media helped these messages and strategies transcend regional boundaries and build global solidarity networks, which is very important. From organizing rallies to providing technical, professional, academic, and financial support, the diaspora created a bridge between local protests and global activism. Notably, diaspora academics and professionals, many of whom had themselves rural roots, played a significant role in framing the global narrative of the protest and contributed to intellectual support for the cause. So the diaspora also helped sustain protest infrastructure at the same time, with langars, the community kitchens, libraries, and educational spaces, which benefited not only protesters, but also local residents. And this strengthened social bonds. So in the second part of my talk, I want to reflect briefly on the lessons we can learn from this movement broadly, which I've also shared in a chapter entitled We Feed the World, Farmers' Struggle Against Global Capital in India, that I've written for the recently published Oxford Handbook of Sociology for Social Justice. So I think there are 5 key takeaways from the movement that hold significant relevance. First, successful social movements often gain strength not simply from numbers, but from the breadth and depth of their alliances. The farmers' movement in India is a prime example. It didn't rely only on a single class or demographic. Instead, it drew power from a wide coalition of groups that have been building solidarity and networks of support over many years. These included leftist political parties, trade unions, student groups, civil society organizations, and other grassroots movements. This diverse base enabled the farmers' movement to go beyond regional or sectoral boundaries and resonate with a wider public and sustain momentum over time. Second, the farmers' movement was not just a spontaneous reaction to unpopular agricultural laws, but I would say it was rooted in a far more nuanced and critical awareness. Protesters and organizers demonstrated a deep political and economic consciousness that extended well beyond immediate grievances. They understood the broader structures of global capitalism and how these forces shape national policy, corporate interests, and ultimately their everyday lives. This awareness was evident in how farmers articulated their opposition, not just as a rejection of specific laws, but as a defense of food sovereignty, economic dignity, and democratic control over resources. They recognized the creeping corporatization of agriculture and the risks posed by market deregulation, including the potential erosion of local farming economies and traditional ways of life. What made the movement powerful was its ability to connect the dots between local struggles and global systems. Between a small farmer losing agency in Punjab and the larger trends of neoliberal reform, trade liberalization, and corporate consolidation. This wasn't just reactive politics, it was a proactive assertion of an alternative vision for agriculture and society, grounded in justice, equality, and sustainability. Third, the farmers' protest sites were more than just locations of resistance. They became living embodiments of the values and the world the movement aspired to create. These encampments functioned as prefigurative spaces, meaning they didn't just demand change, they modeled it in real time. Within these protest zones, one could see alternative forms of social organization taking shape, grounded in principles of mutual aid, collective care, and inclusivity. Volunteers organized free community kitchens or langars, medical aid stations, libraries, informal schools, and cultural programs. These efforts weren't incidental. They were deliberate acts of solidarity that showed how people could come together across caste, class, religion, and gender lines to support one another. Conversations flourished between different movements, such as Dalit activists, students, feminists, and environmentalists, creating a vibrant, pluralist public sphere grounded in shared struggle. In this way, the protest sites became a glimpse of what a just and democratic society could actually look like. By practicing the values they preached, the protesters made their political vision tangible and inspired others to imagine new possibilities beyond the status quo. Fourth, one of the most powerful yet often under-acknowledged aspects of the farmers' movement was its role in challenging and reshaping deeply rooted social hierarchies, especially around gender and caste. Women were not passive supporters. They were active participants, organizers, speakers, and caretakers at protest sites. Their visible and vocal presence disrupted traditional patriarchal norms that often confined women to the margins of political life, especially in rural India. Through speeches, songs, and symbolic actions, women asserted their agency, not just as farmers' wives or daughters, but as farmers in their own right. They spoke out not only on agricultural issues, but also on broader questions of justice, equality, and dignity. This active engagement marked a shift in the public imagination about who is seen as a political subject. Caste hierarchies, too, were challenged by the collective nature of the movement. Shared spaces, shared meals, and collective labor at protest sites blurred social boundaries that are often strictly enforced in rural India. The emphasis on unity and solidarity across caste lines opened up new possibilities for social cohesion and mutual recognition. These disruptions may not dismantle centuries-old systems overnight, but they sow seeds for long-term transformation. And finally, the farmers' movement didn't just achieve a policy reversal. It sparked a broader sense of political possibility and hope. In an era marked by growing right-wing movements, authoritarianism, and corporate consolidation, the movement's victory offered a powerful reminder that organized, collective action can still succeed, even against odds. This success diffused far beyond the protest site. It served as a catalyst for renewed momentum in other movements and gave them a fresh sense of hope, whether they were fighting for labor rights, environmental justice, land rights, or gender equality. Many saw in the farmers' struggle a reaffirmation that people power, when rooted in solidarity and strategic coordination, could still shift the balance against deep-seated systems of power. The movement also fostered convergence, bringing together a wide array of actors who might not have otherwise found common cause. Rural and urban, leftists and centrists, secular and religious, farmers and students, workers and intellectuals. Diverse constituencies came together in a shared struggle. In sum, the farmers' movement in India reminds us that resistance is generative, that those who feed the world can also feed global struggles for justice. and that as sociologists, our duty is to listen, learn, and amplify these voices. That is precisely why this book is so valuable. It does not only document a powerful movement, but also challenges us to rethink our roles as sociologists and researchers of social movements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simin, so much for presenting us these lessons and highlighting the strategies of the movement. And there are like two elements that I want to refer later in the session about this kind of prefigurative spaces that you are highlighting, that I think is really important in order to reflect about the impact of social movements in contemporary times, and this kind of transnational as well, like this kind of transnational connections between social movements. But thank you, Simin. I will, of course, expand a bit more about what you say, but thank you so much for providing these initial comments to the book. I'm going to move to our second commentator, who is Professor Venkatesh Atraya. He is an economist who has worked extensively on the political economy of development, with a special reference to rural India and rural Tamil Nadu. And he has also worked on and published in the areas of food security, gender education, and Marxist political economy. So, Professor Venkatesh, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, this morning, this night, depending on where you listen us today. And you will have 15 to 20 minutes to provide comments. Thank you once again for being here, and the floor is yours. I think you are mute, Professor. Let's wait a little bit. You are back, Professor, but we cannot hear you. So maybe if you can unmute your microphone.
Now?
Yes, you are here. So thank you once again, and the floor is yours.
I'm a little unfamiliar with the equipment that I'm using. This is my mobile phone. More comfortable with laptops, but today I haven't been able to get one. Let me first of all say I'm delighted that a book like this has been written in such a relatively short time. Because, we've written a couple of books before, I know how long it takes. Between the ambition and the eventual output, there's a huge time gap normally. This has been very quick, and despite being very quick, it's been also very realistic, hands-on kind of writing that is very important for those of us who are both academics and also activists with specific sympathies. I mean, I want to put my cards on the table. I'm on the left, and I've been actively involved with the All India Kisan Sabha and its struggles. And I think that when the struggle began, to be honest, not all of us thought that it was going to succeed. There's a huge image of a powerful Indian government, 56 inches and all that. So the general perception was that, how will this succeed? It's a good thing, nice, but will it succeed? And I think the movement has succeeded beyond our expectations in the face of significant repression, as well as numerous ploys employed by the ruling regime and its supporters to divert it, to promote conflict, to use all kinds of tropes against the movement. And it succeeded because, as previous speakers have said, it preserved unity at all times, without compromising on the larger basic objectives of the struggle. I think it's the essays in the book do reflect this very well. I mean, there's a whole set of essays, some focusing on specific states. I like the fact that you have at least 3 or 4 presentations which talk about space, talk about women and song making, talk about uploading tracks to Twitter, and protest songs of identity. It's good. It's not what you normally will find in a standard sociology or political economy narrative. And it's very important that they are there, that they give you some idea of the cultural richness of the movement as well. In extremely diverse country like ours, although the movement itself was in one part of the country, far away in Tamil Nadu, our All India Kisan Sabha activists also organized many support programs, and I was involved with some of them. And I can tell you that in the early stages, the mood was not so optimistic. But as the struggle progressed and we could see that they were not likely to bow down, imagine something that's been mentioned here. More than 700 people lost their lives in the course of the struggle. And we must all spare a minute now to think of those people who lost their lives in the struggle. The government of India has, not been particularly concerned with these matters, but we should be. And I remember that even in the upper house of the parliament, the Rajya Sabha, there was not even a division on this issue. When opposition members sought a division to see who's on which side. So, there was a huge democracy deficit in the way that the parliamentary apparatus handled these struggles. But at the end of the day, I think the way the farmers proceeded and carried people from different parts of the country with them eventually made the government, accept that they couldn't ram through the, act. It's become an act, by the way. It's not really a bill; it's an act. And in a sense, what the movement demonstrated is that when people are sufficiently united and strong, the law that parliaments make, the streets can throw out. And that's important. I think it's especially in a general right-wing shift across the world. This victory is important. That's what my previous speaker also had mentioned this. And I'm putting it in very plain terms. I'm not putting a lot of academic jargon on it. This victory was especially politically important. And in the coming period, it'll inspire a lot of us activists. The specific articles in this book have also been quite useful. I mean, I was reading the more analytical article on Punjab by my friend from the Punjab University, reading other articles in the book. Shamsher and his colleague Paramjit have highlighted the issue of the link between this struggle and the larger agrarian question. And in a sense, I think that's what we should really be thinking about now. Because having said whatever I've said, having celebrated the victory of this movement, thanks to the remarkable leadership of the Samyukta Kisan Morcha, I think we should give credit where it is due. They managed to carry along with them vast number of heterogeneous social forces in a very contested environment in northern India, not one where democratic movements have been very strong. I mean, I come from the south, and we tend to pride ourselves on having had a longer history of democratic movements in the south, perhaps not always warranted, but to some extent. In Delhi, I mean, to get this going in Delhi was quite remarkable, and I think we must celebrate it. But having said that, we have major challenges ahead. Already, the government of India is trying to introduce the same content of the laws through some backdoor methods. We're talking about agricultural marketization and arrangement thereof. And this is in the middle of the whole tariff tantrums of Mr. Trump. There's all this discussion about how India should actually play along and lower tariffs and allow foreign global agribusiness to play a more prominent role in India and so on. So it's not as if the battle has been completely won. We won one important struggle, but the ruling classes are not going to just let go of this so easily. They will definitely want to. I mean, because remember, I would characterize the regime in India today as corporate Hindutva, not just Hindutva, but corporate Hindutva. So the agenda of very powerful global corporate entities is something that the government of India will not easily, give up on. No matter what we have, we have scored a particular success, but there will be more challenges to come in the period ahead. And I think the other important question that will come, which hasn't appeared in a big way in the struggle, is the whole question of rural inequality and what happens with the conflicts, potential and actual, between the rural poor and marginalized and the rural well-to-do. In this struggle, that did not play a prominent role. In this struggle, the focus was somewhat different. There was a nearly, I wouldn't say completely, nearly all in unity of much of the peasantry and including some of the rich peasantry and some capitalist farmers of some size against the state and against global capital. But in the coming days, the other dimensions of the issue of the agrarian question, which have to do with the landless, the land poor, which have to do with the exploited in the countryside, which those sections which endure both caste discrimination and class oppression, those will come to the fore. And so it will be a more challenging job than to find out who the allies are, who the enemies are in the countryside. It's not going to be the same across the country. India is a huge territory, and the rural agrarian relations differ enormously from state to state. I come from a southern state where we had done some work 30, 40 years ago when we were all talking about the mode of production. And I don't know how many of you remember all those old debates about the mode of production, but we've come a long way from that. Now we look at a very different world. And for us, it's like, the world has changed so rapidly around us. So today we are facing global offensive by corporate capital. And, Trump's tantrums aren't tantrums. I'm sure there's a plan behind those seeming tantrums. And I think the democratic movements in the third world have to be very vigilant on this question of how do we retain the unity we have built and how do we further extend it to focus on the interests of the landless, the land poor, and other oppressed sections in the countryside. That, I think, should form an important focus of discussion in the days to come. So when subsequent documentation of these struggles come, and I hope they will come, because this one is a very useful addition to the literature. This I would strongly recommend should be widely read, all the chapters, in fact, because they are quite different in character. That's a nice thing about it. Some focus on a state, some focus on larger national issues, some focus on cultural aspects. Gender, for example, I was very impressed with the focus on gender that is being brought into the book as well. So this is not an end, and this is only a beginning. You'll have to do more and more documentation as you go along, keep track of what's happening across the country, and see how quickly rulers have reacted, how quickly they've tried to find alternative ways of doing the same, pushing the same agenda. I don't know if we have been as alert as they have been, but they still have been very alert. They've been trying to push their agenda in some other way. So I think all of us who are sympathetic to the cause of the mass of the rural population and mass of the urban population as well should remain alert. And this book will help us understand significantly new ways of mobilizing people and keeping them together in difficult circumstances. And the state repression was at its maximum. You still couldn't lose. You see, the fact that the SKM leadership managed never to get provoked in the manner that the state wanted it to get provoked is something very important as a lesson. It could have easily been diverted, distracted, other issues could have been raised. And it was to the credit of the united movement of all forces. And I think that, must give credit. I think the role of the left was very important in keeping the focus on the issues of the poorer sections of the basic problems of the peasantry and the agrarian question, without necessarily, kind of being sectarian and saying we don't want other sections of the farming community. And I think this is an important transition. For many of us in the movement, I speak not only as an academic, but also as a participant in the democratic movement in my country. Sometimes, we get doubted. We get doubtful. We say, are we being too nice to the big guys? So these are questions that we have discussed in the movement. But I think on the whole, this has been extremely enriching struggle. And I think it's a great reservoir, not just inspiration, but also lessons in the period ahead of us. And I think that's how I would like to see it, both as an academic and as an activist. And I hope that we'll all be around to see more of this in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Venkatesh, for providing this really interesting reflection and to showing us the relevance of this movement in a more political perspective. I found that really interesting how you are trying to connect all these collective actions regarding with issues of global capitalism, land, the role of the state, but all the geopolitical concerns that we're experiencing at the moment. So thank you so much for bringing this to the table. And I would like to introduce our final commentator, and thank you in advance once again to Dr. Prithvidatta Chandra for being with us today. He's a social historian, literary critic, and political commentator. He studied history and literature at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi and at the University of Chicago, from where he obtained his PhD. He is also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Chicago and a visiting fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Society in Delhi. He is an Indian intellectual with whose research interests focusing on the history of dissident Indian intellectualism and religious imaginations, literature and political theory, and he has published widely on those themes in both in scholarly forums and in popular media as well. So, Dr. PTV, thank you so much once again for being with us today. And as our previous commentators, you will have between 15 20 minutes to provide your comments. And after that, we will open the floor to everybody to have hopefully a nice and interesting conversation. So, Dr. Priti, the floor is yours. And you are mute as our previous Professor Bankatesh, so hopefully.
Yes.
Here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm introduction, and I'm very delighted to be here. Very grateful for this introduction, for this invitation. Like my fellow panelists, I want to congratulate both Shamsher and Sabah for this. There's an echo. Okay, now it should be fine. For this wonderful achievement, as Sabah said, historians or implied historians are quite resistant to outsiders encroaching on their territory. This is, par for the course in these very in these times where disciplinary boundaries are guarded with stronger barbed wires than national boundaries, so that the encroachments are eliminated. But what's actually interesting is how the historical orthodoxy is being challenged by scholars from various different fields and some historians themselves by focusing on themes which are of great significance to all of us. The way this book has been put together, as a great example of that approach. I'll speak a little bit more about the people's history, the idea of people's history, and how that gets exemplified by this book, partly not just because of my own affiliation as a historian, but also because of my general interest. I've grown up watching farmers' movement, particularly in southern states. There are differences that can be had with demands of farmers' movement. We don't want to get into the political economy questions that Professor Atreya briefly talked about. Despite the real achievements that the farmers' movements have made over the last 4 decades, including the withdrawal of the 3 farm laws, there can be a spirited debate on the legitimacy of demands which are being made and the politics of it. But what is actually really important, that something that is coming out, is our new forms of political mobilization, or new political possibilities that are being engendered by these movements, and how do we see them in the context of our own understanding of social movements that Dr. D talked about in the beginning. So those are my general frameworks to enter into a discussion of this book. The book is a fabulous achievement, partly because it brings together a diverse group of people. This is a point which has been made, but it cannot be overemphasized, because it's so difficult, as we know, to bring together serious scholars who can write with sensitivity and and also bring out some of the elements that have been captured in this book, because any academic engagement usually doesn't reflect that. And I think the real achievement of the editors is in putting together this group, in engendering a conversation amongst them, which will then enable them to focus on themes that usually don't get covered in a typical academic volume or even in a serious intellectual engagement. So when you have architects, when you have activists, when you have young scholars who haven't been contaminated by disciplinary regimes, there is the possibility of something interesting, something close to the reality that can come out, as opposed to jaded methodologies producing already known answers, which are uh, justified on the basis of questionnaires that we get filled out by, the kind of usual suspects that we go to get our opinions validated. So, in that sense, just having a wide group of interested activists and writers who could come together to observe something that is going on amidst us and comment on it, not just to understand what's going on, but also to imaginatively think about what kind of a society we should build, and see political possibilities in that context. That is something which impressed me, in the writings that we find in this book. So, having said that, let me talk a little bit about the idea of people's history. There are, several responses that have emerged throughout the 20th century to the orthodoxies that history discipline or history departments had produced. Whether you call them history from below or subaltern history in our own context, but which get also exported to other parts of the world. People's history, famously made known by Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. But the idea of people's history has been something which has been around in particularly in more populist, left-wing historical scholarship, left-leaning historical scholarship, especially the New Left, as we see in the from the 1950s onwards in the UK. But the significance of this move to think about a people's history is to focus on 2-3 very important things, right? Instead of historical agents who are elites, who are seen as powerful, kings, ministers, generals, or great achievers, right? People who can be seen as epic characters, who can be the subjects of great, literary works. So unlike them, now you can tell the stories of anybody, right? You can tell the stories of ordinary people, right? So the notion of the subject matter of history gets expanded simply because the focus is now on ordinary people, not just on ordinary people, on everyday life itself. And I think one of the great achievements of this book is that even while it is trying to capture a radical moment in Indian politics in the 21st century, it actually pays attention to the everydayness of this process, right? How are people being mobilized? How are people being fed? What are they eating? Who is bringing the food? Right? This focus on processes is something which doesn't necessarily come in grand historical narratives, right? It's that quality which makes people's history really people's history. And this also makes the narratives compelling, because these are the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves. As a young boy, I used to ask, my elders, my family friends, and who were activists in farmers' movement, because those were the days when you would have 100,000 people, 150,000 people, 200,000 people marching to the state capitals in southern states. Who's feeding them? These are the kinds of questions a 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy would have. Right? How are they moving around? What are they doing to get their daily needs met? Where are they sleeping? Right? So when you capture these kinds of details, it also expands the horizon of possibilities for all the people in the community. right, in the nation. And in that sense, right, the possibilities of politics, the possibilities of emerging solidarities, or possibilities of building bridges, that becomes a real phenomena for people. And those lessons are the lessons that we were missing in the last 3-4 decades. They may have been built in certain radical political movements, particularly in the Hindu mobilizational strategies, but in more social movement oriented, whether it's in Dalit movement or in women's movement, it wasn't possible to build on such a large scale, right, these kinds of solidarities. And what the protests outside of Delhi demonstrated was the ability of people to come together and build such a a movement, and the everydayness of it, the ordinary people who were part of it, and thirdly the culture that they produced, right? These three things actually together provide the the real character of this for this book. So when we are talking about the people's history, right, the idea of people's history can be instantiated, or it can be explained by the presence of these three things. Quite often when we write history, or when we are evaluating historical scholarship, we ask these basic questions, right? About whom is this book being written, by whom, and what is the method that is being used. Both Sabah and Shamsher talked about the archive that they're trying to put together. Again, that's a key thing, because in one of the reasons why people's histories don't get written is because of the absence of archives, right? It is the presence of archives which makes historical scholarship possible. If memories, if documents, if traces of the past, or of what's going on or what had gone on, if those traces don't exist, then there's no possibility of constructing a narrative on the basis of that. So in that sense, both the idea of building an archive and simultaneously creating narratives, or at least take the first crack at producing a narrative, these are really important and impressive achievements. And honestly, I think this is the kind of work all universities should be doing. This is the business of universities, to produce such accounts of people, and also show how new political possibilities are embodied within those, and that actually makes it a very interesting. I want to talk about one particular essay, not just because my colleagues have written that, and I'm talking about the essay on food by Sarabjit Natesan and Sabah Siddiqui. That essay is something that I found quite remarkable, partly because of my own interest in not just contemporary social movements, but the kind of resources that they draw from our pre-colonial cultures, pre-colonial social movements. And here, when you think about the role that Langar plays, Langar has been brought up in several other essays as well, but in this particular essay by Sabah and Sarabjit, this is front and center. Why do I want to then, point that out, or highlight that one particular aspect? It's because when you bring in something like Langar, an act of sharing food, what it does is it enables people to transcend the instrumental demands that they may have placed in front of a state or in front of a government. This also shows other ways in which, through this process, they're also building a community. And that community is being built by incorporating resources that exist within that culture. Langar, in that sense, of sharing food or mobilizing food, or the idea of service that comes with that, will not just have a political dimension to the struggle, but also add a spiritual dimension. And in that sense, the idea of politics with which we function, right, from a purely political economy perspective, is augmented by bringing in, a larger idea of a radical community, a larger sense of a spiritual purpose. And so there, food is not simply about, how do we fulfill our everyday needs, something we have to eat, something we have to drink, but it's also the process through which everybody is coming together. But here, the notion of langar provides an added dimension to it, because you're providing food not just as a succor, but it is also um, um, a spiritual act, right? And in that sense, the possibilities of radical solidarity get expanded, and so I thought, it is worth mentioning from that perspective, by the even if you were to take that one example, the everydayness of the struggle gets captured in these essays, and how that actually is quite transformational. So again, I want to congratulate the editors for building this team, and I hope they'll have similar volumes, similar uh, you know anthologies emerge. I mean, you could have, I can very well imagine an interesting anthology of first person experiences, without necessarily any analytical intervention, which can be attempted by the editors, where you have 15, 20 participants speak and reconstruct their memories of what went on. And those kinds of possibilities, I hope, will be explored by the editors. And let me congratulate them again and finish my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Prithvi, for bringing us these introduction reflections. I found really interesting what you say about these new forms of radical mobilization. And I absolutely love when you say all the importance about creating new narratives, especially like from below, or from, as you say, like from the people, and how that can create a different approach to the creation of social movements, but more importantly, to understand the actions of the people from the everyday actions. And I found that really, really interesting. So thank you for the three of you for providing the comments. We have, let's say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to I don't know, provide any more, I don't know, reflections. So of course, if anybody in the call or who is seeing us on YouTube have any kind of questions or comments to any of our commentators or to the book editors, please just raise your hand or send me a message on YouTube. But thank you once again for this. I just going just to kick the questions. I found really interesting in all your presentations that how you're addressing two particular elements, and I want just to provide this initial question, just waiting for more people to don't be shy and hopefully ask you something or providing some reflections. But I found in all your presentations how you're addressing questions regarding power, right? And I found in all your comments and all your reflections how you're trying to address the concept of power in different ways. And I would like to start asking you, like, how for you can be the best, or not the best, like the best, not the best, like, the way to address the concept of power after analyzing this movement, or what can be the lessons from the Indians peasants movement, and how we can reflect more about this question about power, regarding geopolitical power, like Professor Venkatesh was telling us, or how the lessons like Simeon provide to us, how these 5 lessons can intertwine with issues regarding power, the power of narratives, I will say, like how Dr. Prithvi was saying regarding the construction of the narratives, and of course how, as you Saba and Shamsher were saying, like the book can be like seen a work between activism and an intellectual effort, and how, of course, this book can contest power. So I don't know. I would like to know more about your reflections regarding the concept and category of power, and after that, hopefully, some of our the people who are seeing our event can join. So Professor Venkatesh, you are raising your hand. So if you want to go first, yes. So if you want to unmute yourself, and well, just put you
I want to
on
mention
the spot.
there's an
Yeah,
echo
thank you.
that I missed out, which is that one dimension that has not been highlighted in our discussion so far is the specific role played by attempts to develop a worker-peasant alliance. The fact that the working class, the trade union movements, created a broad platform from which they could support the Kisan struggle, and in return now, the Kisan movements are coming to the side of the workers in a struggle against the new codes that are being imposed on the working people in India, which make which violate basically a number of democratic rights for the working people. So I think one of the great lessons of this struggle was that there exists a strong potential for a worker peasant alliance, not perhaps in the old classical early 20th century sense, but in a new modern way that we can actually bring together working people of both the countryside and the cities for a more fundamental democratic transformation. That got left out. I meant to just mention that. I think it's important. For me, it's one of the most positive outcomes of this struggle year and a half. And it's now reflected because the electricity bill, for example, has been very important democratic struggle on that issue. So, this working class peasant interaction and alliance would hopefully get strengthened in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh. Anybody else wants to provide any comments or reflections regarding power? No? I feel like when yes, Shamsher, please.
Yeah, this is just in addition to what Professor Venkatesh just said, and thinking from both academic plus activist point of view, this is something which I particularly looked out for in the while documenting the movement, and also while working on the chapter on agrarian question with Paramjit Singh, that when we see a sectarian, a sector coming attack for various reasons, like there is one particular sector which is being targeted. For example, farm laws meant a great deal for the farmers, of course, to begin with, but they also had spillover effect, and very direct, not even spillover effect, but a direct effect eventually on the classes which are associated with farming, laborers, consumers. So one of the amendments which was part of the three laws was to tweak the stocking and hoarding of the agri produce, and that would have significantly altered the existing consumer rights. So it would have resulted in inflations and black marketing of the agri produce, etc. So as a whole, if you look at with to understand what these three laws meant, they not only were disastrous and dangerous for the producers or the farmers, but also having a significant negative impact on other classes such as consumers, tenants, laborers who were associated with the agriculture production process. Now, to me, confronting the power, which you have very interestingly articulated, is to kind of bring together these sections, and what also Professor Atreya pointed out in terms of having to reach out while certain particular sectors come under attack, having the strategy to reach out and build larger solidarities, and not because you can't confront the power on one front. You have to fight it on multiple fronts because it's multidimensional. The attack is multidimensional. So here, if we just have a look at the farmers' protest strategy, there were professionals who were giving their expertise and their services to work on alternative media platforms, Tractor to Twitter, Trolley Times, Karti Dharti, a number of other initiatives which came into existence to counter the media narrative. Then you have the volunteers who were working in supplying the materials to the protest sites. They brought in a large number of local contributors across different castes and sections in the villages. They made sure that they reach out to all sections in the villages. If you look at the more detailed processes health highlighted in some of the chapters here, also otherwise they created mechanisms and processes which made sure that there is inclusivity in people's participation or contributions. Even if people can't directly come and participate, there were mechanisms that were developed to ensure that people contribute in some ways, in whichever way they can. So to me, responding to this exact question of power is that you need to develop strategies to counter power on multiple fronts, to ensure that your agenda and your articulation is inclusive, and you are reaching out to the more and more people, those who can associate and those who can collaborate with you to fight the power structures that we are experiencing in the under current regimes world over, not only just in India but world over. So that is something that we need to look out for to build these strategies to counter power. I don't know if this is adequately responding to your question.
No, yeah, it is. Thank you, Samsher. Actually, I received two questions on YouTube. One is from Said Bentake and is to Simin. So he's asking, like, in your presentation, you say something about the power of the diaspora in the farmers' movement, and he wants to know how you think this helped with solidarity, and especially international solidarity. So Said is asking, like, if you can expand regarding the power of solidarity between the Indian diaspora and the farmers' movement. This is one question for you, Simin, and I have another one for Professor Pitti by Mikkel Tenkin. Well, I will just say the name, but yeah, Simin, if you want.
Yeah, as I mentioned in different, but thank you for the question. First of all, I think it's a very important point, actually, this connection. As I was trying to say, trying to connect local and global is very important in terms of struggle, but also in terms of solidarities. We were talking here about solidarities on the ground with each other, with different groups trying to support each other, but also we are talking about solidarities that were coming from outside, and that's the point. I think here the diaspora. So the diaspora tried in different ways. I briefly mentioned in my presentation to support the local struggle. But I think what is very important is the diaspora really supported what is coming from the ground. The local struggle was being supported from outside. Sometimes the diaspora actually doesn't do justice to the local struggle, because they try to either co-opt it or change it to the way they want themselves. But at least to my understanding, much of the diaspora in this case try to connect with the struggle, local struggle, and support them in different ways. For example, in trying to globalize their narrative. To a lot of things that I read were written by a lot of people who were abroad. Or writing about it, talking about what was happening inside India, but also like actually providing help for the infrastructure, for the libraries, for the langars, for the in different ways. So it's a very, very good question, and thanks for asking. I think the question of international solidarity is internationalism, always trying to link the local and the global. We are living in the globalized world, right? We cannot think about about our struggles locally, and the solidarities need to also be understood globally. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Simin, for your answer, and thank you, Said, for your question. And I have another question. This is for Michael Ford, and it's to Professor Prithvi, and it's regarding political possibilities. He's asking if you think that the farmers' movement are bringing new different political possibilities to India, and if they are bringing new political possibilities, how you can see the future of this movement politically. And thank you, Michael, for the question.
Thank you. It's an important question, something which has been, engaged, encountered by farmers' movement for quite some time, because in many states there's been an effort to sort of transition into becoming a political party, and that has not always been a success. And this partly also goes back to your question about power in an indirect way, because one of the limitations of Indian farmers' movements has been a movement of middle caste and middle peasant caste basically. So the demands have come from a desire to protect the kind of entitlements, the kind of state benefits that the middle peasant caste have secured, whether it's irrigation, power, various kinds of subsidies, market access, and so on. And whether farmers' movements have been imaginative enough, and inclusive enough to bring in landless laborers, marginal farmers. These have been some questions that have always been asked. What this 2020-2021 farmers movement demonstrated were two things. One is staying power, because this was a movement which presented itself in national capital, made itself visible for more than a year. It was in in national television channels, getting international media access, and so on. And so it was visible, and along with that visibility, there was also some incipient, initial efforts to build a larger coalition, even though the main participants would have come from these middle peasant castes. So, but the kind of community building exercises that I was hinting at, and we need to study more to see whether there were extensive efforts to achieve that, which also attracted more sympathy, more support from a variety of different groups, including professional groups from urban middle classes and so on. And there lies the attraction, because it's not just limiting itself to a set of demands about, which will bring in material benefits to a small section of society or a large group of farmers, but it is also trying to present a broader understanding of community through its everyday actions, not just through its demands. I think we need to make this distinction. How is the protest playing out? How are the mobilization strategies working out, as opposed to the specific demands which connect us to issues of political economy? If you separate that out from on the mobilization front, on the front of using symbols, mobilizing media, social media particularly, there you see certain possibilities. And that is where the new political energy might actually come from. Solidarities might emerge. If you purely focus on questions of political economy, what are the specific benefits that might accrue to which farming group? It might not be attractive enough for a broader group in order to think of larger political solidarities which could emerge from it.
Thank you, Professor Prithvi, for this really interesting reply. I think, Mahavir, do you want to to ask a question. I think your hand has been raised. Yes. Mojave, can you just, I think you're mute. So if you can unmute yourself. Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Uh,
It's only a small comment that I wanted to make. Firstly, I will thank Samsir and Saba to give us an opportunity to, write on the protest landscape of Haryana, because that was the state where many of these activities were enacted upon, and we were like in both the roles we were activists also, and then we were trying to look at this from the geographical political perspective, that how did it emerge. Uh, in this, in fact, the most important aspect of this landscape that emerged was that had it been, if the government allowed farmers to go into the capital, and the question is that they would not have been, to my mind, able to sustain it for such a long period of time. And it was only through, the connections on the borders and on, the landscape of the protest that emerged in many toll plazas. There was a kind of connections, that emerged, and the supplies and, the connections that between the Punjab farmers, Haryana farmers, Rajasthan farmers, and on the other hand, the UP farmers, that was forced only in a kind of landscape that emerged, and I think that played a very important role. But apart from this, the most important outcome of this movement to me was the social capital uh, that was formed in the process of this in this movement. And I think that was reflected particularly in terms of the secular ethos that it created among the peasantry community, that brought the peasantry as well as the working class together. And you remember, I think many of us in India know it, that when there was a new violence, there was a communal violence that erupted, and the males were they were under threat. This was the farming communities which came forward to defend them. And there were many organizations, farmers organizations, unions, they came forward. And surprisingly, even the khaps, which are the social forms which exist in central uh, part of Haryana, and they dominate socially this particular area, they were, which are generally very conservative forms, they came out and they defended, in fact, the males, and they came in their solidarities. So that was the kind of a kind of social capital that and a secular ethos that were created through this movement, that has transformed a kind of social space in Haryana, where farming communities, most of them, I will not say all of them, but most of them, in fact, they came together, breaking the barriers of caste and creed, which is generally created in the political landscape of Haryana, we all know. So it has been, to a large extent, it has been able to break that, and that is very heartening thing, even that we feel here even now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahavir, for this comment and reflections regarding social capital. And I have time for the last question. I received a question from Sam Sabahim, and it's to Saba, and she's asking that if you can expand a little bit more about the role of gender and woman inside the farmers movement, because she said that she found really interesting the role of women, and she wants to know more about your opinion regarding gender and woman in general in the movement. And yeah, so the floor is yours, Saba, again.
Thank you. Is this person in this room, or is it from YouTube?
It's from YouTube. I'm receiving 3 questions from you
Okay,
too.
all right, right.
Thank
I'm going to speak a little and then actually invite Shamsher, who has written a paper on this, to also talk about this. I think that this farmers movement had very visibly women, front and center, and I think there were so many ways in which that this visibility, like not only not only shows their participation, but it also created new forms of subjectivity. So like by being not only present in the protests, by like leaving the house, coming to the camps, but also by becoming visible, I think it has produced some change in itself, right? So something that Simin was talking about, the prefigurement, is something here that we can see that has happened. I think that on one hand we had many young people also emerge, out of which there were many young women, but also that we could see that there were, for instance, the protest camps would have these what they would call the stage daily, on a daily basis. There would be an invitation for people to come and speak to the to a certain protest site. And so there were these stages across all different camps, and organizers of many camps had actually put some time for young people or for women to come and speak, such that there is dedicated time for them to come to the fore. And in my when I went and spoke to some of these I went and did some field work, and when I spoke to people, they said that they would have to prepare for their speeches. They were not used to actually being at the front, and so they had to, like, they would spend, they knew that okay, they had to speak soon, so they would actually try to, they would read, they would discuss, and then they would come and give those kinds of speeches. So I think that that was another place where the organizers actually had created space, and this definitely showed in the visibility. I think that uh, I think Kopal is here, who has written the women and song making paper. Perhaps she could also come for a minute later on. But yeah, I think I'll pass this on to Shamsher.
Thank you,
Thank
Saba.
you.
And yeah, yes, Shamsher, sorry.
Thank you, Sabah. Kopal, are you here in case you want to respond to this question from based on your understanding through your field work and the paper? Hello.
Hi, get my mic to.
Kopal, we can hear you actually.
Oh, you can hear. Oh, great.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
all right. Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Okay. In that case, I'll come in for a short while. Yes. I mean, I think this was
Thank
very this movement in particular, and there've been, of course, a lot of social movements outside of the farmers also in India in the last, well, so many years, a few decades even. But the way women participated in this farmers movement is certainly, there's something new which is happening. Women are not just here participating only as audience. That is something that we see. I mean, usually we do see women. Whenever we see women, we see them in audience in other movements, not so much on the stage, not so much in the leadership. And here I think what the leadership of the movement, the SKM, Sayukt Kisan Morcha, they deliberately, very strategically created opportunities, created within their platforms, to include women beyond just representation. So, and of course, this didn't work. It wasn't very regularly successful in all places. Where there is stronger organized sort of section, you had this working wonderfully well. Otherwise, there were, of course, also places or sites where it was, well, tokenism, but at other places it beautifully led to emergence of leadership, particularly this one toll plaza where I did my field work at, which is where we saw excellent new women leaders who were coming into the public arena for the first time. They were out of 7 days, I think 3 days were women centric. I mean, the women will do everything. They will run the stage. They will plan how things will happen, who will go, manage everything, manage the arrangements, and so on. Entirely led by women. Every week. And otherwise also, I mean, on the other days, of course, it was run by both, but on these 3 days, certainly only by women, led by women, that is. And what we saw was that you had so many women speakers. Women also became activists for the farmers movement, for the Kisan Sabha, not just the women's movement, but the Kisan Sabha activists. And they went for membership tours, from village to village. They were very excited about that. There were so many. Of course, my specific sort of interest was on song making practices and so on, and which was also most of the women that were making these songs were unlettered. A couple of them they had studied till school and not beyond. And these were the women who were taking the leadership, writing, creating, articulating. So this is something, certainly something new that we saw here. That's the sort of generalized response I wanted to give. If there's any specific sort of question, then I could probably engage with that.
Well, thank you, Gopal, for bringing this answer regarding the gender question, as you say, and thank you for bringing all these reflections. And I think that's it, guys. I think we have covered all. I don't know if you want to bring any final comment, any final reflection, anything that you want to say before going to lunch or dinner or breakfast. I don't know what you what you having later, but I don't know, any final reflections that you want to do, or you want me to? Yes, Sabat, you want to say something before leaving?
I think Venkatesh has his hand up as well. Perhaps we can first go to Professor Venkatesh.
No, I just wanted to reiterate what I had mentioned in my presentation, namely that this is the occasion to pay our homage to more than 700 activists who gave their lives in the course of the struggle. And they, this is something we, as I said in the beginning,
I think we're having some problems, some connection problems, I think. That is a shame. Yeah. Professor Venkatesh, I think you are back. No. No, Sam, I think is yes, yeah.
I actually just wanted to say that I was very energized by listening to the comments of everybody here, especially about the work ahead of us. And I think even I said that I feel like this book is an invitation for new work and for new questions. But I think the extent of it, so many of you shared with us that what is the work ahead. I think that I just wanted to say that, it seems to me like writing history is for the future. So we are trying to say something about like what needs to happen, that, here we have an example of something, but it has to be now an inspiration for more things to happen, including more social movements, but also new kinds of intellectual or activist work. So I just wanted to say that, thank you. I think you've all inspired me further.
Thank you, Saba. Simin, would you like to say anything? I saw your head say no.
No, yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone. It has been amazing to be with you, and thank you for inviting me and providing the opportunity to read the book and engage with it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah, so thank you once again for coming. Definitely a lot of really interesting conversation. So yeah, Samcher, sorry, do you want to say something before wrapping? Yeah.
So, sorry to interrupt, Camilo, but I just wanted to say thanks to all of you, including the participants who have our commentators, participants who have stayed for 2 hours. Like it's quite a significant investment that they have made in today's event to stay hooked for 2 hours. It's something is very unusual in the times of this 4 or 5 seconds of reels and all those things that have really been the feeding of our social media. So but I really wanted to thank on behalf of like all the my on behalf of my co-editor and the contributors who have joined to the to the efforts that you have put, especially, and our commentators have put. I know you will do the job of thanking all of them, but I am thanking you and the others also. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So yeah, so who knows? Maybe we can create some social media content in the future. The 15 seconds reel that you are hoping maybe share a TikTok or something, but I don't know if we can talk about it. So once again, have a really good night, day, afternoon, and see you soon in the next session of our event. And have a great day, night, or evening, and see you soon. See you in Rabat. Thank you, guys. Take care.
See you, Camilo, and see you in the UK. Yeah.